Highway 11 runs straight for a long time north of North Bay, and there isn't much to look at besides trees and the odd gas station. Ray had his window cracked, elbow out, watching it all go by like it might do something interesting. "How much longer?" he said. Not really a question, more like a checkpoint. "Hour, maybe less." He nodded and went back to the window. I'd found the job on a regional work board 3 weeks earlier, sitting at my sister's kitchen table in Sudbury with a laptop that wasn't mine, and a coffee that had gone cold. 2 months, housing included, maintenance and groundskeeping at a residential camp on a lake I'd never heard of. Camp had been running since 1961. The posting made a point of that, like continuity was a selling feature. My contract with the municipal grounds crew had ended in April, and nothing had come through since. And Ray needed somewhere to be. His mother had taken a position out in Vancouver, and the custody arrangement handed me the whole summer. That would have been fine under normal circumstances, except I didn't have a fixed address and nobody to leave him with while I worked. The job solved both problems in one motion. The truck bed had a week's worth of clothes for each of us, a duffel, a cooler, my tools. That was the whole move. We came off the highway onto a gravel road that wound through the bush for a couple of kilometers before it opened up, and there it was, a scatter of wooden cabins set back under the trees, gone silver gray the way old wood does, and past them a lodge with a screen porch running the length of it, and beyond that the lake, flat and bright in the early afternoon. Ray leaned forward against his seatbelt to see it better. "That's it?" "That's it." Behind the lodge, off to one side, was a gravel yard with a tool shed, and that was the one I actually paid attention to, more than the cabins or the lake. The lakefront ran the whole length of the property, and way off at the far end, where the tree line met the water, I could see a stretch of chain-link fence cutting straight across it, silver against the green. Ray saw it too. He didn't say anything. He just looked at it a beat longer than he looked at anything else. And then we were pulling into the parking area, and a woman was already coming down the lodge steps toward us. "You must be Carter," she said and put her hand out. "Andrea Matthews. I run this place." Medium height, built solid gray-green eyes that took in me and then Ray, and then the truck in about 2 seconds flat. "This your boy?" "Ray." "Hi," Ray said. "We've got a bunk for you in cabin 7, she told him. "Boy's your age. You'll like it fine." Then she turned back to me and put a ring of keys in my hand, heavier than it looked, and a binder that had clearly been rebound at least once, the cover soft and curled at the corners. "Maintenance log," she said. "Goes back 6 years. There's a list of deferred repairs inside it. The last groundskeeper left mid-season, so you're picking up more than usual. Nothing that can't wait a week or two." "Left mid-season?" I said. "Personal reasons." She was already walking, and I followed because that's what you do the first day. "Cabins are fine, mostly cosmetic. Lodge roof needs a look before fall. Dock at the swim beach could use new decking eventually, but it's sound." She walked us along the front of the property, naming things as we passed them. Water pump house, generator shed, the bell they rang for meals. Down at the far end, where the fence cut across into the tree line, she slowed just slightly. "That section's kept locked," she said. "Has been since last summer. There's an old dock on the other side, decommissioned. I'd ask that you leave it alone. Liability reasons, mostly. Insurance doesn't love an accessible waterfront we're not actively using." "Anything wrong with the dock itself?" "It's just not something we use anymore," she said, and kept walking, already onto the next thing, the well water testing schedule, and there wasn't really a place to put the question back in after that. By the time she'd walked us the length of the property and back, Ray had already peeled off toward cabin 7 with a boy about his age who'd come out to look at the new arrival. I got shown my room in the back of the maintenance building, small, a bed and a desk and a window that looked out on the gravel yard, and I set my bag down and didn't unpack much of it. That evening after supper, I walked the lakefront with Ray. The light was doing that long gold thing it does in late June, the water gone the color of a bruise healing, and the two of us just walked without saying much, which is how we do a lot of things. We got down near the north end and he stopped. "What's on the other side of it?" he said, looking at the fence. "Old dock, not in use." "Why is it locked, though?" "Fence is there for safety reasons," I told him. "Boards are probably rotted out by now. Somebody could go through them." He looked at it a second longer, and then he nodded and turned back toward the cabins, hands in his jacket pockets, and didn't ask anything else. He glanced at the fence one more time before he went, though. Ray turned back toward cabin 7, and I stood at the lakefront a while longer, the locked fence at the north end of the property still visible in the evening light behind him. The hinge on the storage shed door had corroded down past the point where a person could tell what color it used to be. I'd stripped it to bare metal with a wire brush the night before and left it soaking in penetrating oil, and now I was down on one knee with a screwdriver, working the new one into place while the door hung crooked off the frame, dragging a scrape into the gravel every time the wind caught it. That was where I was when Ray came running. He wasn't jogging. He was running like something was chasing him, except nothing was, and he came up the path from the direction of the north fence with his jacket half off one shoulder. "Dad, slow down." He stopped in front of me, breathing hard, and looked at the hinge in my hand like he was deciding whether it could wait. "A kid from cabin 4 told me something." "Yeah?" "About the fence, about the dock." I set the screwdriver down on the step. "There was a counselor," Ray said. "Last summer. His name was Finn Stevens. He drowned there, July 14th, and they never got him out of the water." He said it flat, like he was reading off a label. "Is that true?" "I don't know," I told him. "I honestly don't know." He looked at me a second longer, deciding whether the answer was a real one or just something an adult says to end a conversation. Then he nodded and went back toward the cabins, and I picked the screwdriver back up. I worked that hinge for another hour and got the door hanging square again, and the whole time the name sat there in my head without going anywhere. Finn Stevens. I didn't have a face to put to it. I didn't have anything to put to it except a locked fence and a rope I'd already seen for myself, though I still couldn't have told you what either one had to do with the other. By evening, I needed a form. The maintenance log wanted a countersigned incident report for any structural repair, and a hinge that's rusted clean through the pin qualifies. So after dinner, I walked up to the lodge to get the form out of Andrea's office. The door was unlocked. She wasn't in there. The desk lamp was on, throwing a circle of yellow onto a stack of camper files, and behind the desk was a shelf with a row of binders, the spines labeled by year going back longer than I'd been alive, or close to it. I found the current one, the one with the facilities forms, third from the left. Next to it was a fatter binder with a tab that just said Incidents. I don't know why I opened it instead of just taking what I came for. The binder had a tab for each summer. I went to the previous one. The first entry was dated July 14th. It was typed and formal, written in the flat tone of someone trying not to feel anything. Stevens, Finn, junior counselor, found unresponsive, face down, at the North Dock, approximately 11 p.m., located by a senior counselor conducting a check after Stevens failed to appear for evening head count. I read it once, and then I read it again, slower. The second entry was 1 page over, same date, timestamp 1 hour after the first. Responding staff returned to the dock with a first aid kit and a second counselor. Subject not located. Not in the water at the dock's edge. Not on the dock boards. Not on the shore. 2 words near the bottom, underlined once. Not recovered. Coroner's inquiry closed the following month. Cause of death, drowning. Body, unrecovered. I sat there with the binder open on my knee and read both entries a third time, side by side, my thumb holding the page. 11 o'clock, found. Midnight, gone. Both of those were in the camp's own file, typed by somebody who worked here, filed by somebody who ran this place, and nobody had crossed either one out. I closed the binder and set it back on the shelf exactly where it had been, spine flush with the others, and I took the facilities form out from behind it and folded it once and put it in my shirt pocket. I turned off the desk lamp on my way out because it had been on when I got there and I figured it should be off when Andrea got back. I walked back to the maintenance building in the dark without stopping at cabin 7, and I didn't tell Ray any of it. I sat down at the table with the form in front of me, and Finn Stevens sat down across from that, if a name can do that, along with the hour between when he was there and when he wasn't, and I did not sleep for a long time. I got up before the bell. The camp was quiet the way it is before anybody's fed, gray light coming off the lake, a couple of gulls working the shoreline. I walked the fence line on the campside, the way I told myself I'd only look, and I stopped where the chain link met the trees and I looked through it at the dock for the first time up close. It didn't look like anything. The boards were gray, weathered the way wood gets on a lake after enough winters, but they weren't rotted. Nothing was sagging. The cleats were bolted down clean, no rust bleeding out around the heads. I looked for the thing that would explain the fence, a broken board, a collapsed piling, something a lawyer could point at, and there wasn't one. Then I saw the rope. It was tied off on the near cleat, a plain length of what looked like half-inch polyline, and it ran straight down off the edge of the dock into the water. No float, no buoy, no marker, nothing bobbing to say where the other end went. Just rope, taut, going down into black water and disappearing. I took my phone out and held it up to the chain link and took the picture through the diamond gaps in the fence, twice, so I'd have one that was in focus. Then I went and ate breakfast with the rest of the staff like a normal morning had happened. I didn't get Andrea alone until lunch. She was at the head of the staff table with a clipboard she wasn't really reading, and I set my phone down next to her tray with the photo already up. "There's a rope on the dock cleat," I said, "the one behind the fence." She looked at it for about a second longer than it needed. "That's a depth marker," she said. "Search and rescue left it there, from last summer's recovery effort." She said it easy, like she'd had the sentence ready for a while. "The recovery effort was 11 months ago," I said. "I'm aware of when it was. Rope like that doesn't usually last a winter in that water. The rope isn't a problem." She said it flat, the way you'd close a drawer. "The fence is there for liability reasons. I'd appreciate it if you'd get started on the repairs list. There's a soffit on cabin 3 that's been open since May." That was it. She picked the clipboard back up and looked at whatever was on it. I ate the rest of my lunch without saying much else. After, I went back down to the fence because I wanted another look at that rope in daylight, wanted to see how it was tied, whether it looked new or old. The cleat was empty. No rope, no frayed end, no cut mark, nothing looped around the metal. I stood there and looked at the water off the end of the dock, and it was flat. No ripple working out from where a rope might have been pulled or dropped. Nothing to say it had ever been there at all except the photo sitting on my phone in my back pocket. I stayed at the fence a long time. I don't know what I was waiting for. For the water to do something, maybe. For the rope to come back the way it had left, without a person doing it. Nothing moved out there. A loon called somewhere down the shore, and that was the only sound on the whole lake. Eventually, I went back to the maintenance yard, because there wasn't a version of going to Andrea again that had anything in it. I didn't have a question that wouldn't just get me the same 3 sentences back. The rope isn't a problem. The fence is there for liability reasons. I'd appreciate it. I could hear her saying it before I even got the words together in my head, and there wasn't a way through that. Not yet. Not with what I had. So I worked. I pulled the soffit board off cabin 3, and it came away soft and dark on the underside, water damage from years back, and I measured for a new piece and cut it, and didn't think about much of anything while the saw was running. The light started going long across the yard the way it does in June up here, slow, like it's in no hurry to leave. I finished the soffit and started in on a cabinet door in the lodge kitchen that had been hanging by one hinge since before I got there, and I kept my hands moving because my hands moving was the only part of the day that made any sense. I didn't go back down to the fence again. The photograph was still on my phone, the rope going down into that black water with nothing on the other end that I could see, and the empty cleat was still sitting in my head next to it, and neither one of those things wanted to lie still. I worked until the light dropped low enough that I needed the shop light on, and I stayed where I was. 2 more days went by and the fence stayed locked and quiet, and I told myself that was good enough for now. I had the maintenance log open on the shed table, working backward through the pages to build a repair list I could actually follow. Andrea wanted the shed door fixed and the dock ramp redecked before the end of July, and there was a leaking pipe under cabin 5 that had been marked pending for going on 2 years. I was flipping through July of last year when a folded piece of paper slid out from between the pages and landed on the table. 2 sheets folded twice, handwriting gone soft at the creases like it had been folded and unfolded more than once before it ended up here. "Whoever comes next," it said at the top. I sat down. It was from Jeff. He didn't say his last name until the bottom, but I knew who he was before I got that far. He wrote that the rope wasn't the search team's. He wrote that he tied it there himself, the morning after Finn Stevens went into the lake and didn't come back out of it. He said he'd seen something the night before, from the shed near the north fence, after midnight, when nobody else was awake to see it with him. He said it came up slow, broad and pale, moving in the water like something that didn't need to hurry. He said it wasn't a fish. He said there wasn't anything in a lake in northern Ontario that got that big, and he'd lived up here his whole life, and he knew what belonged in the water and what didn't. So he tied the rope to the cleat the next morning, to see if it would take it. It went taut inside a day, held for 6 days after that. Then it went slack, and he didn't know what had held it, and he didn't know why it let go, and he wrote that part the same way he wrote everything else in the note, flat, no hedging, like a man reading off a gauge. He told Andrea a story about liability to get the fence locked. She believed him. She'd been repeating it ever since, without knowing where it came from. "I left in June," he wrote. "It's July now where you are. I'm sorry." I read it twice at the table. Then I read it a 3rd time, slower. And it was that one line that wouldn't sit still in my head. "It's July now where you are." Like he'd known exactly how long it would take somebody to find this. I don't know how long I sat there with it flat on the table in front of me. "What's that?" Ray was in the doorway. Same voice from the morning he'd come running from the fence, careful, like he already suspected the answer wasn't going to be the whole answer. I folded the note along its old creases and put it in my shirt pocket. "Paperwork," I said. "From the last guy, handover stuff. Doesn't have anything to do with you." He looked at me for a second. Not accusing, just looking, the way he does when he's deciding whether to file something away or let it go. He didn't ask anything else. He turned and went back toward the cabins, sneakers loud on the gravel, hands in his pockets, and I stood in the doorway and watched him cross the yard with the note sitting against my chest. I didn't know what to do with that yet. I sat at the table in my room with the note in front of me and made a list on the back of a work order because I didn't have anything else to write on. The rope was Jeff's, not the search team's. Jeff had tied it there himself, 6 days it held, and something on the other end had let go of it, not the other way around. The shape was big enough to see from the dock at night with nothing but a flashlight. Finn Stevens had been found at 11 and gone by midnight, and both of those facts were written down in the camp's own binder by the camp's own staff. And Andrea didn't know any of it. Jeff's note made that plain enough. He'd handed her a story about liability, and she'd taken it and repeated it for a year without knowing where it came from. I didn't go to her office. I didn't know what I'd say if I got there. Instead, I went back to the maintenance log and worked to the back of it, past the repair pages, to the staff records section, where somebody kept a running list of who'd worked the camp and when. Finn Stevens was in there. Junior counselor, 22, second season, home address in Sault Ste. Marie, a name with numbers attached to it. The camp had a Facebook page. It hadn't been touched since the previous August. A photo of a canoe trip, 40-some likes, a caption about a great week. I scrolled down through the comments under an older post from July and found a name I didn't expect to find. Reese Stevens, asking Finn to call her back, 3 days before the date on the incident report. I sent her a message, told her who I was, that I was working the camp now, that I wanted to ask her about her brother if she was willing. She answered inside the hour. I called the number she gave me from the shed, sitting on the same stool where I'd read Jeff's note that morning, the note still folded on the table in front of me. "Hello?" "Reese, it's Carter. I sent the message about Finn." "Yeah." A breath. "Thanks for calling." I told her I was sorry to bring it up, and she said it was fine, that people didn't bring it up enough. That was closer to the trouble. "In the last couple weeks," she said, "he started sending me pictures, at night, after the campers were down." "What kind of pictures?" "The dock, dark. You could barely make anything out, but there was something in the water, pale, at the surface, and his hand out over it, like he was holding something down to it." "Food," I said. "That's what I figured. I thought it was a fish. A big one. A sturgeon maybe, or a muskie. We used to catch muskie up around Manitoulin when we were kids. They get big, and I thought, that's Finn. That's exactly the kind of thing he'd get attached to." "You thought it was sweet?" "I did. I told him he was being weird, feeding some fish like a pet, and he laughed about it. I reported it to the people doing the investigation after. They wrote it down as distress, isolation, like he was lonely and made something up to talk to." I looked at the note on the table. Broad and pale and slow-moving, Jeff had written. Too large to be any fish that belongs in a lake like this one. "How big was it?" I said. "In the pictures?" She didn't answer right away. "The first one's hard to tell. Just a light patch at the surface. A few feet, maybe." "And the last one?" "The last one he sent me was the night before." Her voice didn't change, but it slowed. "In that one, it was wider than the dock." I didn't say anything for a second. "Can I see them?" I said. "The photographs." "I don't have them anymore." She said it flat, the way you say something you've said before and are tired of saying. "The investigation people took my phone. Gave it back with the pictures deleted. I don't know if that's just procedure or something else. I've been sitting with that for almost a year and I still don't know which one it is." I told her I was sorry, and she said everyone was, and we hung up not long after that. I sat with the note and what she told me both in front of me, not on paper, just laid out in my head next to each other, and they lined up too well to be two different things. Jeff's shape rising under the dock the night Finn disappeared. The rope that went taut and held for 6 days, something on the other end testing it, deciding something. And 2 weeks of photographs before any of that. Finn's hand out over the water with food in it, night after night, teaching something to come when he called. I got up and went outside because the shed had gotten too small to hold that thought. Dinner was starting down at the lodge, and I walked the long way to cabin 7 instead, and stood outside the screen door for a minute without going in. The boys were at the table playing cards, somebody's radio going low in the corner, and Ray was in among them, laughing at something, looking about as much like a regular kid at camp as I'd seen him look since we got here. A while later I came back and stood at the door again, just to look. Ray glanced up this time and caught me there. He didn't wave. He just looked at me for a second, the way he does, filing it, and went back to his cards. Not alarmed, just watching. I turned and walked back across the gravel toward the maintenance building, and by the time I got there, I wasn't turning any of it over anymore. 2 weeks of feeding, 2 weeks of a boy going out alone in the dark to sit at the edge of the water with something in his hand, and the thing in the lake learning his shape the way you'd learn a dog's before it ever took him under. I did the perimeter walk at 7 the next morning, the same as always, coffee in one hand, the other checking the padlock on the shed out of habit. The camp was quiet, the way it gets right before the breakfast bell. Mist still sitting low over the water, a couple of loons calling somewhere out past the swim area. I reached the north fence and stopped walking. A section of chain link had been pulled back from the waterside. Not cut clean. Torn, more like 3 feet wide, the edges bent outward toward the camp, away from the lake. I stood there a second with the coffee still in my hand and didn't drink it. Past the fence, the dock boards had wet marks on them, not footprints. Nothing with toes or claws or a stride I could measure. Just broad, irregular shapes, damp patches the size of dinner plates, running in a loose trail from the water's edge up to the fence line and through the gap. I didn't go through it. I stepped back instead, far enough that the fence was between me and the dock again, and I looked at the wet marks for a long moment, and then I turned around and ran. Cabin 7 was still asleep. Somebody was snoring, one of the counselors probably, and the room smelled like sunscreen and wet sneakers. Ray was in his bunk, on his back, one arm thrown over his face. I put a hand on his shoulder. "Ray, get up." He came awake fast. He looked at me and didn't ask anything yet. "Get your shoes." He got his shoes. I didn't explain it to him on the way out, and he didn't ask me to. I walked him across the gravel path toward Cabin 2, which sits closer to the lodge, up near the flagpole, 30 meters or so nearer to the center of things than Cabin 7 is. I told the counselor there I was moving him for a few nights, maintenance reasons, and the counselor just nodded, like that happened all the time. Halfway across the gravel, Ray spoke. "Is this about the fence?" "It's just a precaution," I said. "Maintenance issue down that end of the property." He didn't say anything for a few steps. Then he said it. Flat. No heat in it at all, just laying it out like a fact he'd noticed. "You keep saying things are fine and then moving me." I didn't have anything for that. I kept walking, and he kept walking beside me, and neither of us said anything else the rest of the way. I got him settled in the new bunk and told him I'd come find him before lunch, and then I went straight to the lodge. Andrea was already at her desk with the log open in front of her, going through the week's meal orders. I didn't sit down. "The fence is cut, north end, from the water side." She looked up at me, and I watched whatever she'd been about to say about the meal orders just drop out of her face. "Show me." We walked down together, fast, not talking, and when we got there, she stood in front of the gap with her arms crossed and looked at the bent edges of the chain link for a long time. She didn't say anything administrative. She didn't say liability, or that's been addressed, or any of the things she usually says. She just went quiet, quieter than I'd heard her go, and looked at the wet marks on the dock boards on the other side. "Do you know what's in there?" I asked her. She didn't answer right away. "I know what Jeff thought was in there," she said finally. I waited. "Finn Stevens was afraid of the water," she said. "The last 2 weeks he was here, he kept finding reasons to miss the morning swim. Sick or busy, or he'd already showered, whatever it was that week. I noticed. I didn't ask him why." She was still looking at the fence when she said it. I told myself it was personal. Something with a girl. Something from home. Whatever 22-year-olds are dealing with that summer. I left it alone. She paused. "I've thought about that every day since July the 14th. I didn't say anything to that either. We fixed the fence ourselves. I went back for a roll of new chain link and the fencing pliers and a bag of zip ties, and we worked the patch over the cut edges together, her holding the mesh flat while I twisted the ties, both of us running a second line of ties along the bottom edge where the fence met the water line, tight, close together, more than the job strictly needed. "Nobody hears about this," she said, not looking up from the fence. "Not staff, not campers." Okay. I didn't know what I'd tell them anyway. There wasn't a version of the truth that fit into a staff meeting. Neither of us said the other thing out loud, the thing that was sitting in both our heads the whole time we worked. Neither of us picked up a phone. The case on Finn Stevens had already been investigated and closed the summer before, and what we had, standing there twisting wire in the morning sun, was a torn fence, a wet dock, and a note from a man who'd left in June. That's not something you call anyone about. When we finished, we stood there together looking at the new chain link stretched tight over the old cut, the ties standing up in little plastic rows along the bottom like teeth. Neither of us said anything more. Then we walked back toward the lodge, separately, her a few steps ahead of me the whole way, and neither one of us looked back at the fence again. I found the sensor in the supply stock behind a box of drywall screws, still in its plastic clamshell, the kind of thing you'd use to keep raccoons out of a garden. It had a 9-volt battery and 2 screws to mount the trigger box to the fence post, and a wire that ran to a receiver you could set up to 60 feet away. I ran it from the fence post at the north end, along the tree line, up the back of the lodge, and mounted the receiver box on the exterior wall by the kitchen window. Any contact with the chain link, anything that made the fence move even a little, and it would sound in there. It took me most of the afternoon to get the wire run clean so nobody would trip on it. I tested it twice, shaking the post hard with both hands, and both times the alarm went off inside the lodge, a flat electronic beep that Andrea could hear from her office. She came out the second time to see what it was. "That's the sensor," I told her. "It's live now." She looked at the little box mounted under the eave, the light on it blinking green, steady. "All right," she said. She didn't ask me what I thought it would catch. She just nodded, the way you'd nod at a weather report, and went back inside. A liability fence doesn't need a motion sensor. She knew that as well as I did, and neither one of us said it. Before dinner, I walked over to cabin 2 and stood outside the screen door for a minute. Ray was at the table inside with 3 other boys, plates in front of them, somebody's mother's care package of cookies split up between them. He looked up and saw me standing there and gave me the same look he'd been giving me for 2 days now. Not scared, just watching, like he was keeping track of something. I didn't go in. I didn't have anything to say to him that wasn't going to sound like a lie, and he already had enough of those from me stacked up. I went back to the maintenance building and sat down at the table with the note in front of me. The camp went quiet the way it always did after lights out, the noise sanding down cabin by cabin until there was nothing left but the frogs down by the water and the hum of the fridge in the kitchen behind me. I read the note again. I'd read it enough times now that I didn't need the light on to know what it said, but I turned the lamp on anyway and read it straight through. I tied the rope to the dock cleat the following morning to see if the shape would surface and take it. I told Gail a liability story about the fence to get it locked. I left in June. It's July now where you are. I'm sorry. The first time I read that line, I'd taken it as something close to poetry. A man marking time between when he wrote a thing and when somebody else would read it. Sitting there with the fence cut that morning still fresh in my head, it didn't read like poetry anymore. It read like a man who knew exactly what was coming and exactly when, the way you'd know a tide table, and had written the date down so whoever found the note wouldn't be able to say they weren't warned. It's July now where you are. I looked at the window. Through it, I could see the lodge wall, pale under the yard light, and the little green indicator on the sensor box, still blinking. I checked my watch, 10:40. I thought about going to check on Ray one more time and decided against it. He was asleep. I didn't want him seeing me pacing. So I stayed where I was, at the table, with the note under my hand and the lamp throwing a small circle of light that didn't reach the corners of the room. 10:45. The frogs kept going. Somewhere out past the tree line, a loon called once, long and low, and nothing answered it. I watched the clock on my phone tick toward 11 o'clock. The alarm went at 11 exactly. It wasn't loud. It was a thin, flat buzz from the box I'd mounted on the lodge wall, the kind of sound that could have been a smoke detector with a dying battery. But I knew what it meant, and I was up out of the chair before it finished its first cycle, Jeff's note still lying open on the table under the lamp. I was at the north fence in under 2 minutes. I know because I checked my phone on the way. The chain link was exactly how I'd left it. New wire over the cut, zip ties along the bottom edge, all of it undisturbed. I ran my hand along it anyway, feeling for give, and there wasn't any. The sensor box was mounted low on the post, and its little light was blinking red, steady, not the pattern for a fence strike. I crouched and looked at it. The contact was reading from the dock side, not the campside. Something had moved out there, on the boards, after the alarm already went. I stood at the gate with the key in my hand for a long time. Long enough that the frogs kept going the whole while, and a bat came low over the water and went again. And I thought about Ray asleep 200 meters behind me. And I thought about nothing at all, really. Just stood there with the key against my palm and the gate in front of me and the dock beyond it, dark and flat and quiet. Then I put the key in the lock and turned it. The gate swung inward on its own weight. I stepped through onto the dock side of the fence for the first time since I'd arrived, and the boards under my boots were the same weathered gray I'd seen through the chain link that first morning, and they didn't creak, and they were dry. The water on either side was black, not dark. Black, the way water gets when there's no moon and no wind and nothing under the surface reflecting anything back. I walked to the end of the dock. My flashlight beam went ahead of me the whole way and found nothing. No rope this time, no cleat with anything tied to it, just the boards and the dark water past them. I stopped at the end and pointed the light straight down. It took a second for my eyes to find it. 5 meters down, maybe less, rising without any hurry at all, was a shape. Not a fish. Not anything with a head or a tail or two sides that matched each other. A mass, pale, the color of the underside of something that's never seen light, roughly round, wide as a car is long, and around its edges a slow rippling, sections of it contracting and letting go, independent of each other, like it was breathing through its whole body instead of just one place. The flashlight beam hit it and didn't go through. It just spread out across the surface of the thing, the way light spreads on a wall instead of glass. I didn't move. I don't know why. I should have run right then. It kept rising and the water didn't do anything. No wave, no sound. It broke the surface 2 meters off the end of the dock, as quiet as a held breath being let out slow, and I stood there with the light on it, and my heart going so hard I could feel it in my jaw. And there, in the middle of it, flush with the top of the mass like he'd been laid into it and it had healed shut around him, was Finn Stevens. Face up, eyes open. His skin didn't look 11 months dead. It didn't look dead at all. No gray to it, no marks. Nothing wrong that I could see except that his arms went out from his shoulders and disappeared into the pale tissue up to the elbow on both sides, and his chest was moving. Small movements, regular, in and out. He was looking right at me. "It keeps you," he said. Quiet, no fear in it, no relief either. The whole mass turned then, slow, the way a boat turns when nobody's steering it, just drifting round on some current I couldn't see, and his eyes stayed on me the entire time it moved. "I'm not cold anymore," he said. I ran. I don't remember deciding to. My legs were already moving before the rest of me caught up, back along the dock, boots loud on the boards now, through the gate, and I didn't stop to lock it behind me, didn't stop at the shed. Just ran across the dark grass with the flashlight beam jumping wild in front of me, and those two sentences going around and around in my head like they'd been said right up against my ear. Cabin 2 was dark. I hit the door open with my shoulder, and there was a second, just a second, where I thought I'd gotten the wrong bunk, where none of the shapes on those mattresses looked like my son. Then he sat up. "Get your shoes," I said. He didn't ask me why. He didn't ask me anything. He swung his legs off the bunk and found his sneakers in the dark by feel and pulled his jacket off the hook without a sound, like some part of him had already packed. I had him by the hand before he had the second shoe tied all the way. Across the gravel, past the lodge, the flashlight still swinging wild in my other hand because I hadn't thought to turn it off. I didn't look back at the fence. I didn't look back at the water. I got him in the truck, and I got in, and I had it started before the door was even shut all the way, and gravel went out from under the tires in a way it never should on a camp road at 11 at night, and I didn't care. We came off the camp drive onto the highway with no one behind us and no one in front of us, just the two lines of the road running out ahead into the dark, and it wasn't until we'd put a good 10 minutes between us and the gate that Ray spoke. "Is it the fence?" Quiet, not scared sounding, just asking. "We're just going," I said. He looked at me a second, and then he looked back out the window at the black trees going by, and he didn't ask again. I drove for another 20 minutes with both hands tight on the wheel before I picked up the phone off the seat and called Andrea. She picked up on the second ring. "Carter." Her voice was already awake, already braced for something. "I went through the gate," I said. "I saw it." I told her. I don't know how I managed to say it in order, but I did. The water going still and then not still. The shape coming up without a sound, the size of it, the way the light didn't go into it right, just spread out across the surface like it was hitting something with no bottom to it. I told her what was in the middle of it. I told her his skin was fine, his eyes were open, his chest was moving like he was only asleep. I told her what he said to me, both things, word for word. Andrea didn't say anything. I looked at the phone to see if the call had dropped. It hadn't. The seconds kept ticking up, top, 40, 45, past a minute, and I could hear her breathing on the other end. Slow, like she was holding onto the desk or the wall or whatever was closest. Then she said, "Is Ray with you?" "Yes." "Good." A breath. "Don't come back." She didn't ask me to call the police. She didn't tell me what she was going to do, if she was going to do anything, if there was anything left to do. She just said it again, quieter the second time. "Don't come back," and then the line went dead. I set the phone on the seat between us. Ray was watching me. "Who was that?" he said. "Andrea." He didn't ask what she said. He turned back to the window and put his forehead near the glass, and after a while his breathing changed, and I knew he'd gone to sleep sitting up, like it cost him nothing. The road ran south under the headlights, mile after mile of it. Black trees and the white line and nothing coming the other way. I kept checking the mirror out of habit. There was nothing behind us. There was never anything behind us. That didn't make it easier to stop checking. Grayling showed up around midnight. A gas station lit up too bright for the hour, a strip of buildings, a motel sign buzzing at the edge of the highway with half its letters dark. I pulled in and left the truck running while I went into the office, and the kid behind the counter barely looked up from his phone when I asked for 2 rooms. I carried Ray in. He didn't wake all the way, just enough to walk himself the last few feet and fall onto the bed with his shoes still on. I got them off him. I got the blanket over him. He was asleep again before I had the door shut between our 2 rooms. My room had a lamp with a shade gone yellow with age, and a chain lock that looked like it had been painted over more than once. I turned the lamp on. I put the chain across. I sat down on the edge of the bed and I didn't lie back. The room smelled like carpet cleaner and cigarettes from 20 years before the no smoking signs went up. Somewhere outside, a transport truck went by on the highway, slow at first, and then gone. And after that, it was just the hum of the lamp and the sound of Ray breathing through the thin wall between us. I sat there with my hands on my knees and the window across from me going from black to something less than black. And I did not close my eyes, not once, waiting for the first gray of it to come up over the trees on the other side of the glass. The OPP detachment in Grayling was a squat brick building on the edge of town with a flagpole out front and a parking lot half full. I went in at 9 in the morning after eating nothing and sitting through most of the night with the lamp on. Ray waited in the truck with the door locked and a comic book I'd bought him at the gas station down the road. The officer at the counter was maybe 50, gray at the temples, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. He asked what he could help me with, and I told him I wanted to add to an existing file. Finn Stevens. He typed the name and the file came up and he didn't say anything about how old it was. "You have information related to the investigation?" "I do." He got a form and a pen, and I sat across from him at a little table by the window and I told him what I'd seen. The dock, the water, the shape coming up under the flashlight. Finn's face, his eyes, the two things he said. I kept my voice level. The officer wrote as I talked and didn't stop me and didn't look up much, and when I was done he read it back to me and asked me to confirm the time, 11 at night, and I did. He gave me a case number written on a slip of paper. He said someone would follow up. His face didn't do anything the whole time, no frown, no smile, just a man doing paperwork on a Sunday morning. I drove back to the motel and Ray was still in the truck with the comic book open on his knee, not reading it. We went south. My sister had a house in Sudbury with a spare room and a fold-out couch, and she didn't ask many questions either, just looked at my face when we came in the door and decided whatever it was could wait. It waited. It's still waiting, some of it. The letter came 3 weeks later. One paragraph, OPP letterhead, case number typed at the top, matching the slip in my wallet. It said the investigation had concluded. No evidence of a living person located at the Camp Ventry property. File closed. I read it twice standing at my sister's kitchen counter, and then I put it in a drawer with the takeout menus and didn't take it out again. Around the same time, I found the camp's website had gone dark. A single notice up on the front page, camp closed for the remainder of the season due to a maintenance issue, dated 2 days after we left. Maintenance issue. I almost laughed at that, standing there with my sister's laptop open on the counter, and then I didn't. My last paycheck showed up in the mail after that, a plain check in a plain envelope, and in the memo line, in handwriting I didn't recognize, somebody had written, "Thank you for your service." I looked at that for a long time. I never figured out if it was Andrea's hand or somebody else's. I cashed it anyway. We needed it. Ray didn't ask. Not on the drive, not in my sister's spare room those first nights when I heard him turning over on the fold-out and not sleeping. Not when September came and he started at a new school in a city he didn't know. New kids, new halls, a locker combination he had to write on his hand the first week. He went through all of it without once bringing up the fence or the dock or why we left in the truck at midnight with his shoes half on. Then on a Sunday in late August, before school started, we were at the kitchen table having lunch, just the two of us, my sister out somewhere with her own kids. And Ray had a sandwich in front of him he wasn't eating fast, and he said, not looking up, "Is the thing in the water still there?" I put my fork down. "I don't know," I said. "I honestly don't know." He nodded. Just that. One nod, not fast, not slow. He picked his sandwich back up and ate the rest of it. He didn't ask again that day. He hasn't asked since. I sat there across from him with my own food going cold, and I watched him eat, and I thought about the letter in the drawer with the menus, and the fence I never went back to lock, and the empty cleat, and Jeff's 2 pages folded up somewhere in a box in the truck bed. I still don't know what came up out of that water, or why it wore Finn Stevens's face when it did. or whether it is still down there tied to nothing, waiting on nobody, in a lake I will never see again. I said it to my son at a kitchen table on a Sunday in August, and he nodded, and that was the end of it, as much of an end as either of us is going to get.